Happy New Year. This is our very first JBS Job Seekers webinar for 2025. I want to introduce myself. My name is Elisa Udaskin, and I am a career specialist in career services at JBS, Jewish Vocational Service, and we're located in East Orange and Montclair, New Jersey. So first, a little bit about JBS. JBS was founded in 1939, and we help people overcome obstacles to finding employment. Our job seekers programs, which these webinars are part of the job seekers programs, are fully funded by the Jewish Federation of Greater MetroWest and by Project M, and we thank them so much for their support. So this morning, I am so excited to welcome our guest speaker, Marty Gilbert. I'll tell you that this topic about ghosting, very, very popular. We have a lot of people joining us today. So a little bit about Marty. Marty Gilbert is the founder and CEO of the North Shore Executive Networking Group, the largest job search organization in the U.S. Marty's group is comprised of over 11,000 members, with more than one member landing a new job each day. Over the past 14 years, Marty's job search coaching, networking meetings, webinars, and workshops have helped over 3,000 professionals to land new career opportunities. Additionally, his trademarked "what the hell" approach to job search has gained significant notoriety as a unique methodology that enables individuals to accelerate their engagement with target companies and key influencers. Marty is also a frequent job search speaker at large university alumni groups, including Harvard, Yale, Cornell, Howard, NYU, Chicago, Michigan, and several others. I'm delighted to welcome Marty, and I'm turning it over to you now to share your wisdom.
Well, thanks to all of you for participating in this session. So what the topic is that we're going to talk about today is ghosting, and I'm pretty confident that maybe every one of you that's on this conversation today have been at some point during your job search ghosted, and it's unfortunate, it's unprofessional, and not acceptable. We're going to talk about some of the symptoms of ghosting and why they happen. And then I'm going to give you 17 actions that you should take to try and diminish the chances of becoming a victim of ghosting. So let me first start with a couple things about my organization, NSENG. As Elisa mentioned, we're the largest job search group in the United States. We've got over 11,800 members. We're getting close to that 12,000 member mark. We've got at least one member landing a new job every day for the past 7 years. It's been great. I started this as a side gig. It turned into a full gig for me about 5 years ago when I left the corporate world to dedicate all my time. NSENG stands for the North Shore Executive Networking Group. Our website is nsenginc.com. Great place to network. And even though all of you are located on the East Coast and I am here in the Midwest in the Chicago area, I do have members all over the country, probably a couple hundred in the New York, New Jersey area, and then throughout a lot of other parts of the United States. The membership is free. I urge any of you, if you're interested in joining, just go to the website, click on the join now, and you will immediately get 2 free webinar recordings from me and the opportunity to network with folks in the group. Let me just share a few things with you. Above and beyond being a member of NSENG, you can also join our LinkedIn group. Again, it's a very safe place to communicate with other members. I have jobs that are advertised there from time to time. I've got libraries of recorded webinars that I've done in the past. I have 17 on-demand recordings that anybody can get access to on all different aspects of job search. Those are each about 90 minutes in length. I have 3 3-hour workshops, including my patented what the hell approach to job search. The concept behind this approach is what the hell do you have to lose by doing things that other job seekers aren't doing. The whole thing that is so critical to any job search is visibility. You've got to get known, you've got to get visible, you've got to get people to know and understand who you are and why they should be spending time talking with you. I've created 13 what the hell moves to accommodate that. The second recording's on how to use LinkedIn as a platform and how to optimize your LinkedIn profile. Third one's on how to create an effective job search plan. Coaching is a big part of what I do, particularly for individuals that are fairly far into their careers. I have job search coaching packages and one-on-one custom coaching services that you can always look at on your time. And if you're interested, I'm happy to set up an exploratory conversation. I did want to mention one service that is open to anybody who's in a job search. The U.S. government sets aside several $100 million every year for unemployed individuals to get potentially free training. It's called the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act. So I've transposed these. So it's Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, or known as WIOA, W-I-O-A. Every state has access to these funds. You should do a Google search for WIOA approved training companies, and you'll find plenty in your area. And they will help you apply for a grant. And should you receive the grant, they typically range anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 worth of free training that you can get from that company that has helped you apply for the grant. And I partner with a company here in the state of Illinois, but I know there are plenty in New York and New Jersey and all along the East Coast on all different topics. These are just a few examples of some of the topics that you can get free training for. And it's important because this is one way to increase not only your skills, but it will help make you more marketable. Having a project management certification or Lean Six Sigma or Agile and all these different software languages and other things that other companies may specialize in can be extremely helpful for you in your job search. If you would like to get notified whenever I post something on LinkedIn, and I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, I've got 30,000 LinkedIn connections, and I usually post a couple times a week, all job search related topics that I speak on. And just go to my profile, click on the bell, and you will be alerted whenever I post something. So let's talk about ghosting, okay, and what's going on, okay? And I think that these 2 rounds of interviews is something that many of you probably been through. You go through a phone screen more times than not initially. You may spend, maybe anywhere between 30 and 60 minutes during that conversation. And you, of course, have put in some prep time for that call. And then if it goes well, your next conversation is likely to be with the hiring manager, okay? And for that meeting, you've probably put in a fair amount of prep time, more than the phone screen, and it would be anywhere from 45 to 60 minutes. And then you get complete silence. Well, it doesn't end there, because there are many folks that go through a 3rd round that might be with 4 of the hiring manager's peers, which includes prep time and, of course, the 4 hours that you spend on the premise. There might be a 4th round where you interview with the hiring manager's boss. Okay, and again, there's no magic to the order of these things, and they can go in very different orders from time to time. But these are things that many of the members in my group have experienced. Again, another hour of prep time. You've been told now after 4 rounds of interviews that you're one of 3 finalists. Okay, which means that you've got a 5th round of interviews where they're now going to ask you to make a presentation. That presentation might involve, 5 hours of your time. There might even be rounds 7 and 8. And I've had people that have had as many as 8 rounds of interviews and still get complete silence. So let's define what ghosting is, okay? It's the act of cutting off all communications with the candidate without any explanation after you have already put in a fair amount of time. Okay, you're left hanging, you don't have closure. And for the purposes of this presentation, I don't define ghosting as uploading a resume and not hearing back. I don't consider that to be ghosting, only because there are so many people responding to online ads in particular that nobody can keep up with them all. My premise is that ghosting starts after you've had at least 2 rounds of interviews. And so if you've had a phone screen and you haven't had any other interviews after that, and you haven't heard anything, for the purposes of this conversation, I'm not going to consider that ghosting, because the HR departments, particularly talent acquisition teams, are fairly overwhelmed. And I can tell you that one of the functions that have been hard hit in the last probably 15 months in organizations in terms of budget cuts have been talent acquisition folks. So just keep that in mind too. Let's just use that as our rule of thumb for today, 2 rounds. Okay. I run a lot of polls on LinkedIn, and I asked the question to folks, going back probably close to a year ago. Have you ever been ghosted by a potential employer after having been through at least 2 rounds of interviews? Now, I had over 600 people respond to my poll within 7 days, and 92% of them said yes. Okay. And I've done other polls like this on different aspects of job search. This is the one that probably really hit home with the largest number of individuals. Now, one thing I want to cover is there are different types of recruiters. Okay. There are contingent search firms. Contingent search firms are typically, in many cases, maybe a one-person shop, but it can be, several people inside the firm, but they do not have the exclusive rights to that search. Oftentimes, they are shopping around job seekers to companies, hoping that they can create some interest with that company, but the company has not hired them to, take on the search. The second is retained search firms. Retained search firms are probably the most professional of all the talent acquisition people that at least I've come across. And I'm talking about companies that have been given the exclusive rights to find the candidates for the various searches that are being conducted. So no other firm can get paid for these. These are very credible firms. Some of them, many of you may be familiar with. Firms like Korn Ferry, Spencer Stewart, Russell Reynolds, Heidrick and Struggles, Boyden, Slayton, Chase Slayton. There's many, but there's about probably a top 20 or 30 throughout the country that are great companies to have yourself aligned with if you're looking for a VP or C-level role. They typically don't get involved with many searches under that echelon because they're going to get paid typically about 33% of your first year's salary when they deliver the candidate that the company ends up hiring. And as you can imagine, retained search firms represent less than 1% of the jobs that are out there at any given point in time. So it's a very specialized category for folks that are very senior in companies and that are looking for very senior roles. The third category are internal talent acquisition teams. Okay, and these are folks that are employees of the company that is recruiting. Now, some of them may hire an outside recruiter to help them, okay, to bring in the right talent because maybe they don't have the ability to do it on their own. And all of these organizations, particularly retained search firms and internal talent acquisition teams, have applicant tracking systems to be able to vet candidates. So it's important that you understand there's quite a difference between these different recruiting institutions. So here's just a few facts about ghosting. Okay, one is 75% of job seekers have been ghosted after getting an interview. Okay, most job seekers say that COVID was not the reason for getting ghosted. Okay, only about 27% of U.S. employees believe that they've never been ghosted while being a candidate. 40% of job seekers believe it's acceptable to ghost an employer. And in a few slides, we're going to take a look at the other side of the story. And 10% of job seekers have been ghosted after having already been offered the job.
Marty?
Yes.
Marty, there's a question, excuse me, regarding the definition of ghosting. So there is a question, if you've had 2 job interviews and then you receive, let's say, an automated, you're not in the running anymore, or we've passed you over, is that considered ghosting, is the question?
No, that's not ghosting because you've received a response. You've received a response. Now, granted, it may be automated. It may be coming from an applicant tracking system. But I can tell you for a fact, because I coach a lot of people who have been rejected by applicant tracking systems, and I've still been able to get them interviews because we go around the applicant tracking system. Remember, it's only a piece of software, okay? Don't empower it. And just because you've been rejected doesn't mean that you can't get the job. You got to get to the people, and we're going to talk a little bit about this, that have the influence, that have the ability to make decisions, and that own the budget. And it's not a piece of software. And I will also add to that, if you're looking for a job in HR, then HR and talent acquisition are going to be very important targets for you. But if you are not looking for a job in HR, I contend that that's almost the last place to go. Because if you want to get to the people that own the budget and have the decision-making authority, that's going to be the hiring manager, that person's boss, if they have a boss, and their peers, because these are the people that are weigh in on the decision. The applicant tracking system and talent recruitment for that purpose is just to see who is at a superficial level, potentially a qualified candidate for a phone screen. But you can get phone screens even when getting rejected by the applicant tracking system. So there's a huge emotional impact that takes place when you are ghosted, right? You get frustrated, there's anxiety, it can lead to depression and tremendous disappointment. And the fact is that 43% of applicants say that after being ghosted, it took them a long time to recover, right? Well, you've got to deal with the fact that, that it's going to happen. You have to accept that it's going to happen, and your ability to handle those situations and respond to them and be resilient enough to take it, to the next step is going to be a key part of your success in your search. Now, here's the flip side of the story. What the employer's view of ghosting is that 95% of employers believe that they have been ghosted by prospective candidates. Okay. 30% of job seekers have ghosted a company after an interview, and that's up 18% from 2 years ago. So even ghosting is taking place on the job seeker side. 7% of employers say that a candidate didn't even show up for their first day of work. Okay. And I can tell you, I have had people who have been offered a job and have shown up at work only to find out the person who offered them the job has left the company. And by the way, the person who's taken over the department has decided that this position is no longer needed. Those things happen. Okay. That's why you got to have a lot of opportunities being worked on at the same time. 46% of employers believe that there is more employer ghosting of candidates than in previous years, and almost 30% of employers say that they haven't ghosted a job seeker in the past 12 months. Okay, so there are two sides to this, and it's important to understand why it's happening. Okay, so here again, none of these are excuses, but I just want you all to understand what are some of the contributing factors. Okay, the recruiter or hiring manager may be overwhelmed by the candidate response because today, any decent job is getting anywhere from 1 to 200 candidates responding to it. Okay, they may not have an applicant tracking system that can automatically send out rejection emails for them. And in my mind, quite honestly, any company that has an ATS has virtually no excuse for not sending out a rejection email, because it's simply hitting a button and then sending it to all the candidates that you want to let them to move on with their lives. But nonetheless, it does happen. The recruiter or the hiring manager maybe has not adequately trained themselves or their people on how should you be interacting with job seekers. The recruiter or hiring manager may be absolutely clueless and have no sense of empathy. And there is a lot of that out there. There may be very bad communication between the recruiter and the hiring manager. And this oftentimes is a big weak link in a lot of companies. And quite honestly, a lot of the internal recruiters don't necessarily have incentives to give you much feedback. Now, some companies are going to avoid giving you feedback for fear that they might say something that could get them into legal trouble. Okay, and this is absolutely true, particularly for folks that may feel that they're being discriminated because of their gender, because of their age, their place of origin, any number of things. So they play it safe and don't give you any response. An internal candidate oftentimes surfaces at the last minute when they've already gotten it down to a couple very qualified candidates. But it's not unusual that somebody inside the company says, you know what, if you don't give me this job, I'm leaving. And if that is a valued employee and they've already invested, tremendous amount of time in ensuring that this individual is successful, well, oftentimes that happens at the last minute. And some companies believe it's better not to communicate bad news and would rather go silent. Okay, coordinating those internal schedules always, lengthens the process, and the company may, in fact, be negotiating with their number one choice, and you might be number two. that negotiation may take a week or two or longer sometimes to get the arrangement settled and signed up. And of course, for the person to pass, various, reference checks, and other things that they may require. So it could take several weeks for the candidate that was their choice to ultimately be the candidate who's going to report to work on day one. The company may have changed the job description because they weren't getting the candidates that they wanted, and they decided to keep looking and get another, fresh set of candidates to consider. The company, and this happens a lot of companies have ultimately decided not to decide. You can't do anything about this, or you can't do anything about most of those issues that I've already shared with you at this point. And that's why you got to focus on the things that you can control, okay? Are companies, allowed to be, negligent in their hiring process? Absolutely. And companies can decide not to decide. And that oftentimes is a huge factor because there's a high cost to making the wrong decision. And that's what I want to give you a sense for now, okay? So let's just assume it takes 3 months to hire, to recruit, and find the individual and give that person an offer. And I can tell you by today's standards, most companies are not meeting this. You want to give the individual to learn, okay? That could take 3 months, okay? They may be from your industry, but they got to learn your products and your technology and your processes. You've got to give them an opportunity to succeed. And if they fail, and some companies require a performance improvement plan, which could add another 1 to 3 months to this whole process. So before companies have to go out and replace somebody, they may have already invested anywhere from 9 to 12 months easily on a candidate who just didn't work out. And there they are again, going out and recruiting. So a lot of companies are being very conservative in their hiring. They are looking for that ideal candidate to the nth degree, more so than they were 5 or 10 years ago. And these are all contributing factors as to why this is just taking extraordinarily long amounts of time. So what are job seekers saying about ghosting? And I'm not going to get into long debates, but these are just a few stories that I have heard from individuals in my group. Okay. I've sometimes been through 3 or more rounds of interviews and then asked to create a 30-minute presentation to a panel of on my perspectives about the job that I was interviewing for. And I never heard back from the company on whether or not I was still under consideration. Another individual says, after several interviews with 6 different people in the firm, I was told that I would be receiving an offer by the end of the week. That week came and went. I emailed to find out what's going on, and no one ever answered any of my emails. I invested a lot of time. I can't get the courtesy of a yes or no. What's wrong with these people? Okay. When I was looking, I just wished that companies could quickly put me out of my misery instead of leaving my status in as review. If there is no chance, just mark me as not selected. Send me an email letting me know, and I can move on. I don't expect a personal touch in round 1, but I intended to still hold on to my hope, simple enough. And then the last one, I've been through 3 rounds of interviews with the current CEO to be his replacement. I've interviewed also with his direct reports and the private equity investor of a cellular phone company. After 5 weeks, they flew me down to Indianapolis to present me with an employment agreement to become the new CEO of the company. When I landed in Indianapolis, I was told to turn around and fly back to Chicago because something had changed. What changed? I never knew. Weeks went by. I reached out several times and never received an explanation. And I feel very close to this one because this is one of my stories. This happened to me personally. So I know that everybody probably has a story around this, but I think I wanted to share a few of these with you so that you know that it's not just you. It's just a part of the job search, and there's nothing you can do about it. But there are things you can do, and that's what we're going to get into, that can help diminish the chances of becoming a victim of ghosting. I'm going to talk first about 5 actions that you can take before you actually have been ghosted. And remember, I'm saying ghosting is at least 2 rounds of interviews. And then I'll move on to 12 actions that you can take once you believe that you've been ghosted. Again, we're trying to reduce the incidence of being ghosted. So the first one, you got to set the right expectations up front. You know, the job is going to have ups and downs. The job search is not a straight line, and it's not perfection. So you've got to prepare yourself for that. Many internal talent acquisition teams are not great at following up. I think you'll find that the retained search firms are very, very good at it because let's face it, they're going to walk away with a pretty significant amount of money, okay? Unlike somebody who's internal to the company already. And always have a lot of opportunities in the hopper. You all need to act like salespeople, and any good salesperson needs to have a plan B, C, D, and E. So having multiple opportunities being worked on at the same time will help make the disappointment at being ghosting a lot easier to accept because there are other things that you can fall back on. Number two, you always have to be leveraging your network for introductions. And this is where having more and more LinkedIn connections is so critical to your success. I can't say enough about this platform because people that have more LinkedIn connections can get better results when they do filtered searches on the platform. You can find people by company, you can find people by geography, you can find people by job title or by industry. These are all things that should be a part of the way you go about your job search, because the more focused your search is, the quicker it is that you're going to get results. And also keep in mind that of all the jobs that are advertised online, only about 15% of the jobs that are filled happen because of an online ad. And this is why I tell job seekers, don't spend more than 15% of your time answering online ads. In fact, it should probably take less of your week because completing an online ad is pretty simple, okay? Also keep in mind that, greater than 60% of the jobs are filled through referrals, okay? The art of networking is enormously important. And so you've got to get really good, you've got to get really comfortable with it. And companies know that when they get a candidate who's been referred into the company by somebody who's already inside the firm, the chances of that individual getting an interview go up dramatically. But they also know that those candidates, if hired, end up being longer-term employees. And that's important. Also keep in mind, there's nothing wrong with going out to people that can make introductions for you. And if they give you an introduction that gets you into a company or they're already in a company, you have the opportunity to put money in their pocket, because most companies today will reward anybody inside a firm who recommends somebody who gets hired. They're going to reward them $1,000 to $2,000 on average. I've heard of companies offering their employees in excess of $10,000 because the cost of hiring is significant. So you've got to become an individual who creates champions inside companies. And by the way, in many cases, it's going to come from somebody that you did not know before you started your job search. So please do not be disappointed if you don't get a lot of great help and assistance from your closest friends, your family members, and your relatives. This is where LinkedIn opens up your world in huge ways. Network candidates are going to get preferential treatment. Number 3, email cover letters. This is a topic I feel very strong about. I've done a 90-minute webinar recording on resumes tell, but cover letters sell. And I use the term emails and cover letters interchangeable. It's essentially an email that you can send with a resume attached. And I know for a fact that 2 out of 3 job seekers don't write them. And I know why they don't. They tell me it takes them 1 to 2 hours to customize each one to every job that they want to apply to. Well, I've developed a way where you can write highly tailored email cover letters in less than 10 minutes, and that's what I shared during that recording. What you need to be able to do with these emails is to identify the most important 3 or 4 requirements of the job from that job description. And then you've got to be able to tie specific things that you've achieved or accomplished in your background that tie to those 3 or 4 key requirements. But you have to be able to write them in virtually 2 lines. So you create the categories. You might have 3 or 4 categories that are key requirements of the job. And under each one of them is a bullet point description of what was the challenge you faced, what were the actions you took, and what was the impact of your actions. This is the art of copywriting. I can say that because I grew up as an advertising copywriter, and the key thing about really good writing is getting to the point without getting too verbose, too wordy. What happens when you send an email cover letter? Okay, and this is one of the ways that you can get a job interview even when you're rejected by an applicant tracking system. Well, your email gets shared with other hiring influencers within the company. Your email gets shared as a reminder, and it serves as a reminder why you're a strong candidate for this job. And by the way, just because you sent this email to 4, 5, 6 people inside the firm for a specific job that they're trying to fill that you think you are a good candidate for, if you wrote a good email, don't be surprised if that email gets shared with other hiring managers outside the company, because we all have friends that work in other firms. And just because we don't think you're the right person for this finance role or operations role or marketing role doesn't mean that I'm going to just let it die. If I know somebody who might be looking, or if I just know somebody who works in a firm that is from time to time looking for good talent, I'm going to share it with them. So this does not happen if you don't send emails. Number 4, make sure that you are in fact being ghosted. Okay, a lot of us think we have, and that's why I think this rule of thumb of 2 rounds of interviews is a good benchmark, because I don't think you can really expect to hear back if you've had, you know, just an online application, or if you've just had a phone screen with somebody in talent recruitment. Check your spam folder. Okay, you may have gotten a rejection and just didn't see it. Where are they in the interview process? Do you know? Did you ask that question, which is important? What's the timeline? Again, another important question you need to ask when you have a phone screen. How much time has really passed? Okay, companies are never on your timeline. They are never, moving as quickly as you think they should. Has the recruiter or hiring manager been on vacation? Okay, they may have scheduling problems with other candidates, or they may have challenges in comparing notes between the various people that have interviewed you, because even after 2 rounds of interviews, you probably will have interviewed at least with the phone screener and the hiring manager, but there might even be other people that have weighed in on that second round of interviews, and they want to compare notes to decide who are the top 3 or 4 candidates that we want to move on to the next stage in the process. Number 5. Okay, these are questions that you need to ask at the end of an interview. Okay, whether it's the phone screen or if it's your second round, you want to ask, are there any topics that you wanted to cover that we did not yet address? You got to get that last bite at the apple, because keep in mind that phone screens are essentially a checking the box exercise. The talent acquisition person there has got a list of, pick a number, 10, 15 key requirements that the individuals that they're interviewing need to meet, or at least a large number of them need to be met before they consider moving them on to the hiring manager. And so you got to ask this question, because if enough boxes have not been checked at this point, you want to know which ones are empty, so that I can really quickly, before we part company, address those with a story that will show you that I am in fact very qualified for some of those things. Another question you want to ask is, can you tell me what are the next steps in the timeline that are likely to take place? Another question is there any reason why you wouldn't move me forward to the next step in the interview process? And I think a lot of job seekers are resistant to ask this question, but it's a great question. It will help you better understand whether or not you're still in the game. Okay, so if you don't ask, you won't know. Okay, and that's an important part of all of job search. You got to ask some very specific questions, because if you don't ask, you don't get. The last one is, would it be okay if I followed up with you in a week? Now, they may say no. That's okay. They say yes, great. In a week, you're going to follow up and find out, what's happening. Now, before we move on to the additional 12 steps, are there, Elisa, any questions that anybody has on these 5 that all are things that you can do on the front end to help alleviate the potential of getting ghosted?
Yes, thank you, Marty. So we have 4 different people who asked questions. I'll just say the order. David Solomon, Robert, now I can't read my writing. The last name starts with an R, Hope Friedman, and then Beth Cagle. So David, did you want to ask your question?
I'm coming off screen. I'm trying to remember exactly what the question was. I think it had to do with
Okay.
so Marty, when we talk about ghosting, and you've been going through some of this right now also, insofar as the reasons that it may be taking longer, right? And I know I generally will ask, when should I expect to hear back from you? If I don't hear back from you by such and such a date, is it okay if I reach out? So I'm putting that into play as part of trying to make sure I have expectations set.
Good.
When you don't hear back from them,
Yeah.
or sometimes they might say, I'm going to put you into the hiring manager, and I'll get back to you. And so they're already telling you that you're moving on to the next round. I know you say that the screening call does not count, but the expectation is that they're supposed to be getting back to you also. What's the time that you should allow or expect before you consider that you're ghosted? Because even after a second round of interviewing, uh, 2 months later, 3 months later, you get the notification, sorry, you weren't selected, right? So what's the time period that you consider before you ghosted?
Okay, so thanks for your question. I do consider the phone screen one round. That's one round, okay? And then oftentimes it can lead to the second round, which is more times than not a conversation with the hiring manager. Okay, if they told you that, you know what, you should be hearing from us in a week, what I would do is I would give them another week grace period. What you don't want to do is to come across potentially desperate, and some people get so anxious that virtually that next day after the week they said that it would get back, and they're on top of the employer, and that can be conceived. It can be perceived as either being desperate or somewhat annoying. So you don't want to be perceived as a pest. But so that's why I say, you know what? Give them an additional week. If they said you're going to hear in a week, great, give them 2 weeks. And if that in that 2 week period you haven't heard, then reach back out to them. I think that if you've had a conversation with the hiring manager, you want to try to have that follow-up conversation with the hiring manager as opposed to the talent acquisition individual, because that's the person who really has the decision-making power and can tell you one way or another where things stand.
Okay, Robert, thank you. Robert, did you want to ask your question?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So this is kind of tangential to the ghosting process. So I noticed there's a lot of ghost jobs out there, right? Where like the firm has no intention of hiring for this role, which then can feel like ghosting, although it doesn't fit in with your definition of it. I guess my question is like, is there a way to like identify these ghost jobs?
I don't think so. I don't think so. And I would be curious, how you think maybe you've seen some that they're ghosted. But my feeling is that responding to a job should not take a long time if you've got the right process in place, and if you're qualified. So the one thing I will say about the emails is that they serve multiple purposes, not only showing that you're really interested in the job, but delineating things in your background that align with the job that's being filled. But they also enable you to get into the hidden job market, which is anywhere from 30 to 40% of the jobs at any point in time. These are jobs that are not advertised on LinkedIn. They're not advertised on Career Builder. They're not sitting on Indeed. They may be sitting in someone's head and haven't gotten out there yet. It may be companies that have made very intentional decisions, not to advertise and rely on their employees to make recommendations. And this is where, emails are so important, because you can be emailing multiple people inside a company that don't even have a job for you, but create an opportunity for you to have a conversation, because you know what? The email was enticing. Your background looks really good. Maybe we don't have a need for this person right now, but let's have an exploratory conversation. I've done this myself on multiple occasions where I've created a job for myself at VP levels on a few occasions, and have gotten some great results from them. So I don't know how to identify what jobs are out there are not real jobs, but I think it's fair to assume that most of them are, because if they're advertised, the company has spent some money, which means there's got to be a level of commitment. So respond. I just, suggest you respond to all the jobs that you think you're qualified, and assume that they are real.
Thank you, Marty. So Hope has a question and asked me to read it. Okay, so can you please elaborate what is meant by network candidates be better candidates? Not sure what better refers to.
Okay, so if you are, for example, let's say you're interested in company ABC, right? They've got a job and you think you're the right candidate. If you can find an individual that can connect you to somebody inside that company, or if you know somebody in that company who might be a LinkedIn connection of yours, you can, you're going to reach out to them and say, look, I've seen a job for a marketing manager. I'm very interested in the role, and I was wondering if, you would have a couple minutes to have a quick conversation with me, because I'd like to understand the organizational structure a little bit better. If that person then has a conversation with you and they go, boy, I'd be happy to, to recommend you for this job. Okay, you then oftentimes there's a system inside companies where they can take a candidate and submit them online electronically into the system, or you have an opportunity to apply online and say so and so has recommended me. Those people are going to be given a priority over other candidates, because they've essentially been cold. They've already been, people that someone's inside the company thinks is a good candidate. So your chances of getting an interview through a networked individual inside that company is going to go up dramatically. And your chances of potentially getting a job offer when you're one of the finalists is also going to be more favorable for you, because there's somebody advocating on your behalf that has some level of influence. So networked individual is somebody who has networked into the company, who then can help champion their cause.
Excellent, thank you. So we have 4 more. People are very excited about asking the questions, and then I'm just going to stop at everybody, and then you can have questions, but we're going to ask at the next break. Okay, so the 4, okay, is so Beth first, then Heather, then Vivekananda, and then Leanne. So Beth, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, my question is, it's with the cover letter. What do you think about doing something where it says, I noticed that you are looking for X, Y, and Z. So you're pulling the most important things that you think that you can connect with. And then doing, here's how I feel like I could make an impact. And then bullet pointing the 3 that you feel like you would be the most pertinent to their wants and needs in the job posting.
So under each of those bullets, let's just say there are 3 different categories within that job, whether it's operations or finance or legal. You got to tell a story. You need to show a proof point, and that proof point can't get too long. And that's why I say there to every bullet point, there's essentially a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's the challenge, it's the actions you took, and the impact or results of your actions. This is tough for a lot of people to write without getting too extensive. But yeah, so you want to say, great, I'm really strong in managing technical projects. Great. Now put under that the brief story that might have some metrics that might be able to just at least help people understand what your impact was. Because we buy products on value, we buy candidates on value. And you've got to be able to demonstrate that you've been there and you've done it well. And so this is where I tell people 90% of the job search is marketing. Okay, this is not an HR exercise. It's not a talent recruitment exercise. It's all about positioning, packaging, messaging, and targeting your message to an audience of folks that essentially becomes your marketing campaign. And that's what you've got to be able to do here with the email cover letter, because it'll open up doors for you that oftentimes a resume and a LinkedIn profile can't, because it enables you to control the story. And you don't control the story in a resume or LinkedIn profile, because for many of you, those are really lengthy, reviews of your background. And so I'm just a huge believer on effective email cover letters. for that
So
reason.
just finesse the bullet points that you think are the best match with like some kind of data that would resonate.
Yeah, yeah. Every one of you should, when you look at a job description, for every key job, key requirement, and there might be 7, 8, 10, put to the right of each one, what is the story you're going to tell? And then when you write your cover letter, figure out how do I tell this in 2 lines of copy, but as proof that you are strong in, marketing, web marketing, that you're strong in lead generation, that you're strong in new product rollouts, just as examples.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, Heather, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. So I wanted to just confirm, Marty, that slide number 5 with the questions to ask at the end of an interview, that you do feel we should ask that to the talent acquisition initial screen call.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most important, some of the most important ones are, what are the steps in the process that lie ahead, and what's the timeline? Okay, and I think the next one that's really important is there anything that would prevent you from moving me forward in the process? Are they going to tell you the truth? Maybe, maybe not. But I can tell you, if they're in love with you, they will absolutely tell you, oh yeah, I'm going to recommend that you have a conversation with the hiring manager. Now your mind is somewhat at ease. Okay, great, you passed go. You accomplished your front end goal in this screen. So there's nothing wrong with asking that.
Thank you.
Okay, Marty, we just have 2 more, and then I'm making a list for the next
Okay,
round. Is
yeah.
that okay? Okay.
Sure.
Vivekananda, did you want to speak?
Yeah, so just continuing on the previous question on asking why you would continue or not continue, I would agree that to continue the next step, you would almost get in the meeting, but if it's not, you're putting the hiring manager in an uncomfortable situation. So depending upon how you manage the interview, this question, I believe, should be situational.
You can pick and choose, whether you ask any or all of these questions. Okay, I think they're fair questions to ask, and the fact is that the one question that that you cited, is there anything that would prevent me from for you moving me forward in the process, is just a reaffirmation that what, this is a job I'm really interested in. It's also a job that I think I'm highly qualified for. Now, do they agree with you? Maybe not. Okay, and they, like I said, they may be very open and honest with you, which might give you some great feedback. Okay, too many people have interviews and don't get constructive feedback on why they weren't move forward in a process. Well, you might get some feedback that says, what, you never touched on these 3 topics, or I wasn't convinced that you were strong enough in this particular area that in our mind is essential to the success on this job. So yeah, it's a personal choice to decide, if and when you want to ask all these. But I don't think that that what I'm trying to do is alleviate situations where after you have interviews, you're wondering, where do I stand? I think answers to these kinds of questions will help clear that up for you. So thanks for your question.
Excellent. Okay, last question before we continue with the presentation. Leanne, would you like to ask your question?
Sure. Back a little while ago, you had mentioned something about the company deciding not to decide. What exactly does that mean? Have they just said to themselves, we don't know what we are doing, or we don't know what we want to do, and we're just gonna stand like statues? I don't get that.
Yes, and yes. There are a lot of companies, and this happened a lot during COVID, but it's still happening today. A lot of companies are so conservative with their hiring because, as I mentioned, when you hire the wrong candidate, it's very costly to the company in terms of time and money, right? So they may feel that, we don't have the ideal candidate yet. We haven't seen that person. Okay. Yeah, we've interviewed some people here, but you know what? We've gone 7 months here without somebody in this position, and things seem to be just fine. Now, the penalty is that people who are now stepping forward and having to do a lot of additional work, they may leave, okay? And that does happen, happens a lot. But there are companies that that have said, you know what? Maybe we don't need this position, or maybe it's not so urgent that we fill this one right now and fill these other three. Because you know what, the business is still doing okay. I don't hear people complaining that we haven't filled the role, so we can still save some money and some aggravation and the risk of potentially hiring the wrong person, and just keep things going the way they have been. So that's always an option that they have. It's too bad, but it does.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, we want to hear more from you, Marty.
All right, so I'm gonna go through the next because there's a lot of material, and I know that you guys have a session that you want to do on networking. I'm happy to to go beyond the hour and a half that we've allocated, but let's get through the bulk of the presentation, and I'll answer as many questions as you guys want. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so let's move on to now things that once you believe you've been ghosted, what can you do? Okay, one important thing is you should always be sending out follow-up emails. Okay, and it's not just a thank you. Anybody can say thank you, but if you don't send them, you absolutely diminish your chances of moving on in the process. What these follow-up emails show that you're serious about this job. It demonstrates that you're proactive, that you take the initiative. It shows, your writing skills, okay? And every job involves writing one way or another. And too many people don't write very well. Your email gets passed around to other folks so that, if you're still in the running, unbeknownst to you, 4 other people may have gotten your email that you sent out to every person that you interviewed with, just to kind of build up some fervor within the organization. And that email serves as a constant reminder of what value you bring, because that email is not just a thank you. You are reminding them of 3 things in your background that address 3 of the most important requirements of the job. And this is, that earlier question on how to write these. It's really critical. So if you've identified what are the 3 most important requirements of the job, then you want to have a little story that very briefly explains the things you've done in your past that address each of those 3 areas. And now you've armed people with things that they can refer back to when the group of them get together and start talking about what they think might be the 3 or 5 best candidates to continue on in the process. So sending those emails are not simply to say thank you for your time. It's to reinforce a few examples of things from your past that are very, very relevant to this job. So here's what a follow-up email can look like, okay? I just wanted to thank you for taking the time to meet with me regarding the account executive role. I'm very interested in the position, believe my experience aligns well with all the requirements of the job. As a brief reminder, here are a few highlights from my background. Again, just a few of them that tie to the opportunity. Account management, and here's the bullet point, okay? Managed several retail accounts, including Walmart and Amazon, and grew revenues by 36% within the first 12 months. Great. And this is what I mean by key requirement, proof point. Key requirement, proof point. Key requirement, channel partner management. At XYZ Incorporated, I identified new distributors and resellers that created entry into the education and healthcare markets that delivered a 41% increase in revenues within 24 months. Notice, and I realize not everybody has metrics in their roles, okay? But notice what I've done in every one of these cases, because I wrote these for a client of mine. The percentages, I didn't say 35%. I didn't say 30%. I didn't say 40%. Every one of these is a slightly off number. It plays on the psychology of the reader. If we say 41% instead of 40%, it sounds more credible. It sounds exact. And little things like this can really weigh heavily in the way that your email is interpreted. Should you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I hope I'll have an opportunity to share more about my background in the weeks ahead. This is a follow-up email to an interview that you've had. And you can send the same one, and maybe in the second round of interviews, you've interviewed with 3 people. You can send the same one to each person. That's okay. But notice, each one of these are a category that were a key component of that job description, and we've created a proof point, okay, under each one. All right, number 7, call the hiring manager and follow up after you've had 2 rounds of interviews. Deal with the person who has the greatest influence, who can make decisions, and who owns the budget. It's not a difficult call to make, and here's what it sounds like. This is John Smith. As you know, I've been interviewing for your operations manager role over the past 6 weeks. I'm calling or I'm writing to you. This is a phone conversation. This is not an email, by the way. It's too easy for people to delete emails. So this is a phone call back to the hiring manager. I'm calling because I'm very interested in the opportunity, but haven't heard anything since my last interview 3 weeks ago. So I'm wondering if you've already made a decision or might have an update that you can share with me. There's nothing wrong with sending this. You're not putting them on the spot. If they have nothing to share with you, there's a good chance they'll tell you right then and there, you know what? We aren't done with the interviews, with all the candidates. We haven't yet come to the final 3, any number of things, but don't make this long and drawn out. It's very simple, and then be quiet and let them respond. It's easier than ever to get people on the phone. That's one of the good things that has come out of COVID, because there are still many companies that have their employees working remote. Okay, and in many cases, it depends on what state you live in. And I can tell you, here in the state of Illinois, there are still so many companies that have every one of their employees working remote. Either for reasons of COVID, or because they found that we're actually getting more out of our employees with them working remote, because they don't have to spend an hour commuting each way to work. They can work longer hours, and we enable them to make their better use of their time. So it's not a tough call to call back to the hiring manager. Number 8, go back to other people that were part of the interview process, okay? Because they may not be aware that a decision has not been made, okay? So first start with the hiring manager. If you can't get a hold of the hiring manager, then there's nothing wrong with going to some of the other people that you've talked with. Maybe they thought that you have received an offer and it just hasn't been actioned yet. They could become advocates for you inside the company, because some of these people may feel so strongly about you that they want to go to bat. And they might share some very valuable feedback with you as to why you haven't heard. Okay, there may be things that you're just not aware of. So, number 9, this could be one last email that you send to the hiring manager after you've been through a few rounds of interviews. I'm writing because I sense that you may have decided to move forward with another candidate for the director of marketing role. If that's the case, I'd just like you to keep me in mind for other opportunities as they may arise. Okay, I'm very interested in your company and believe I can offer a great deal of experience in the following areas, and you can list them out. Should things change on your end, please feel free to reach out to me. Great. So you've told them that, you know what, I really am sold on the company. Okay, and maybe they haven't even really made a final decision yet, in which case they don't want to lose you if you are still in the running. So you'll get some feedback from them, but you're telling them that even if I don't qualify, or I'm not the chosen individual for this role, I'm still interested in the firm, and maybe there's something else that is in the hopper, or something else that can be created. So this is one approach you can take on an email back to the hiring manager. Or again, it could be done over the phone. Here's another slightly different approach that you can take. It's been several weeks since my last round of interviews on June 15th, and I remain very interested in the company and the role for finance manager. However, if you're not yet convinced that I'm the right candidate for the role, I'd be happy to consider taking on a project that you want completed, but just don't have the resources to address it right now. Again, as a reminder, here are some of the things that I'm strong in. I welcome your thoughts. I love this approach because for one thing, there may be projects that they have to get done, and they have not decided on a candidate yet and want to get these things done right now. Well, guess what? You're not going to work for free. You can give them a proposal if they're interested, and ultimately it might put some money in your pocket. And by the way, project work can oftentimes lead to full-time employment. I've done it a couple times in my past, and it's a great way to see whether or not this company is the right environment for you, and at the same time enables the company to see, boy, this person is really effective. She's done a great job interfacing with the people in the department. They like her. Would they let you go? I think the chances of keeping you on either for more project work or for something potentially full-time is a real consideration. And I've seen it happen with many people that I've coached. And so I like this approach because it's showing flexibility. And again, maybe you're not the chosen person and they still need other work done. You could get some project work from this. Here's an approach that I don't recommend, again, as a follow-up after you think you've been ghosted. As you know, I remain very interested in the operations director role that we've discussed over the past several weeks. I'm writing because I just received an offer from another firm, but your particular position is of greater interest to me. So if you should happen to make a decision on the preferred candidate over the next 3 days, please feel free to let me know. I don't like this for a few reasons. One is they may feel that you're pressuring them into making a decision that they're just not ready to make right now. And the second piece is you may still be in the running, but you might be effectively eliminating yourself from consideration because they go, you know what? He's already got an offer someone else. We know we need at least 2 more weeks to make a decision. So let's cut this person free and deal with the 2 other candidates that we still have in mind. When you get a job offer, if it's something that you want, but maybe it's not your first choice, and you would love something else that you're still in the running for, there's nothing wrong with taking that job offer and starting that job. And people oftentimes, will have to leave a job that they've accepted over the last couple of weeks or last couple of months because the real job they were really interested in finally came through. It happens. It happens a lot. And so, many people that I've hired, have had situations where they had multiple opportunities going on. Okay. And any good job seeker should. And when the right one comes across, sadly to say, they may decide to leave. And you might be one of those people. Might they be upset? Yeah. But if you got to remember, you're doing this for yourself and not necessarily for the company that you're going to be working for. You want the right job for yourself. So don't let them eliminate you because you're trying to, you might be painting them into a corner and saying, I've got another offer, but I really prefer your company. All right, number 10, getting ghosted may have actually done you a favor. When you get ghosted, it is in many cases an indication of how this company operates. It may be telling you this company is very disorganized, that they don't know how to make decisions, that they lack the ability to empower people to make hiring decisions, that they just don't have the sense of urgency that you would like them to have as an employee in a company. The company may be at risk. Maybe their finances are, financial situation is really bad. Maybe layoffs are coming. Maybe there's a merger and acquisition that is around the corner, maybe, resulting in this taking longer. So just because you've been ghosted doesn't mean that you missed out on a great opportunity. It may, in fact, be that you missed out on a great opportunity to work for a very bad company. So that is sometimes the case. Number 11, don't take it personally. And it's real easy for your confidence to get dragged down when you get ghosted. It gets dragged down when you get rejected by various jobs that you thought you were a great candidate for. So keep in mind that you can't take every one of these personally. There are 100 to 200 candidates applying to every one of these jobs, and someone may have come in with a stronger networking connection into a company than you had, or maybe you didn't have one at all. And again, having a networking connection into a firm always gives you an advantage over other candidates that don't have one. And of course, at the last minute, an internal candidate may have raised their hand and said, by the way, guys, if you don't give me an opportunity to get this job, I'm out of here. And if that's a candidate they feel that they, an employee that they feel that they can't live without, then that person may be getting the job that you thought you were going to get. This is why you always have to have multiple things, in process at the same time. Any good salesperson always has a backlog of opportunities, and every one of you need to look and act that same way. All right. Build up a backlog of opportunities. Think like a salesperson. Don't slow down. Even when you're told you're getting that job offer on Friday, absolutely do not slow down your search. I have seen so many occasions where people have made the mistake of slowing things down because they were told on Friday you're going to get an offer letter, and Friday has come and gone, and the next Friday has come and gone, and they decided, you know what, I'm going to sit back and because I've got a job, just waiting for me, and it never happens. And guess what? They've lost all their momentum. One of the things that you want to do is be in a situation where you get multiple offers and you can play them off of each other. This is the value of having an outbound marketing campaign, because you're generating all kinds of buzz, not only with companies that have jobs, but also with companies that don't have advertised jobs, but that are of interest to you because you bring value. Maybe you come from their industry. Maybe you worked at one of their competitors. Maybe you've got stories you can tell that demonstrate, the value you can bring. Number 13. Learn from the experience, okay? And even though, ghosting is not something any one of us want to go through, the fact that you were ghosted might be a reflection on some of the things that you didn't do very well during the interview process. Did you come across confident? Were your answers really on the topic that they were asking you to address? Did you do enough homework on the company and the industry? And by all means, do mock interviews. Did you truly connect with interviewers? And there are so many ways you can connect with interviewers, not only professionally, but personally. A lot of us have some personal information in our LinkedIn profiles about what we do outside of work. And, people put in special interests they have. You should always look at people's LinkedIn profiles all the way down to the bottom, because you might see some causes that they contribute to that you do as well. And now you've got a conversation piece in an interview that can make you a far more likable candidate. I mean, let's face it, the best candidate does not always get the job. But the most likable candidate, or somebody who connects on a personal level with the interviewers, has a very significant advantage, because we tend to hire people we like. Is this somebody I want to work with? Is this somebody that I want working for me? Is this somebody I think that can get along with the other employees on my team? Did you connect your skills to the requirements, of the job? Did you interview with a level of energy? And one way to do that is either sit on the edge of your seat or stand up while you're talking, if it's done over the phone or on Zoom. And again, we talked about the likability factor. Practice doing mock interviews on Zoom. It's a great way to really see what you interview like. Get somebody on the other end of a Zoom call, have them ask you 5-10 questions, record the session. You may come to realize, you know what, I don't sound as good as I thought I did. Okay, you could get some very candid feedback from this. Observe how you come across. Are you confident? Are you staying on message? Are your responses fluid? Are you telling stories that excite the person? And the last one is, are you using a lot of non-words? Here's what I mean by non-words. Words like, like, some of these words are unavoidable. But people do notice when they hear you saying and and so many people today use the word like. And these words get inserted for a reason, because they give our mind literally just a second to think about what we want to say next. But it's far better to reduce the amount of times that words like that are cropping up in your responses verbally, because they do demonstrate, in some cases, a lack of confidence, but they also demonstrate to the recipient that you may not be a very good presenter. I might not feel confident enough that you can be standing in front of a group of my peers presenting about our department. And if you can't present well, then I don't want someone like that on my team. So good thing to do is record your interviews, play them back, see how often you say these words. And one thing that I do with some folks that I coach is that when I go through mock interviews with them, and whenever they use one of these words, I'll give them a snap. Keep going. They say like, give them a snap. And you'll be surprised how many times you actually do this. Again, we all do it. What we want to do is try to reduce it as much as we can. So wouldn't it be great if you could get a personality assessment of the interviewer before you interview with them? If that's of interest to you, then I suggest that you take down this website, crystalknows.com. crystalknows.com. This will give you the ability to put in somebody's LinkedIn profile into the Crystal Knows website. And based on the content sitting in that person's profile, it will give you an assessment of their personality. Now, I've done this on many occasions, and I got to tell you, with every single person I've done it with, it's been highly accurate. But it's totally dependent on how much information they've got in their profile. Now, this is an example of an assessment of my profile. I have a lot of content in my profile, so it's one of the reasons why I think it's hugely accurate. What it does on the on the left-hand side over here, it's got a wheel that describes different attributes, and it says that I'm a driver and a captain. But what you also are going to get is all kinds of information about what motivates me, how to communicate with me, how to work with me, all kinds of aspects of what it's like that makes me tick. And if you knew that ahead of time, going into an interview, whether it's a phone screen, it's a phone call, a Zoom meeting, or in person, it might provide you with some pretty valuable information on how to construct the conversation and how to emphasize certain things in your past. Number 15, we're almost done here. Don't burn a bridge. If you are so disappointed with how you've been treated and are disgusted with the fact that you've been ghosted yet one more time, don't put it out there, in a reprimanding email, because even if you didn't get the job, there might be other things down the road. Okay, the person that they hired may not work out, and they may then go to their second choice. You might be number two. This happens a lot. That person may have said, you know what, after a month, I got a better offer with one of the companies I was interviewing with, and if you guys can't meet or exceed it, I need to move on to a better chance for myself. So people leave jobs, very quickly. Maybe the job was put on hold and it resurfaces again in 3 months, or the interviewers may decide, you know what, this person didn't get the job, but I thought she was really strong, so I'm going to recommend her to a couple friends of mine who work in other companies. Number 16, know when you got to cut the cord. Okay, there are going to be times when there's nothing you can do to turn this around. Move on, and that's why resiliency is one of the most important skills when it comes to a job search. You got to be able to bounce back from disappointment. And 3 out of 10 will get you into the Baseball Hall of Fame. But 1 out of 200 applicants can get you a new job. And the fact is you got to keep at it. Understand what you didn't do well and improve upon it. And put those disappointments behind you and move forward. So these are the 17 things that we talked about. I said there were some things here that you can do before the ghosting has occurred. And again, my definition of ghosting is 2 rounds of interviews. And then these were things that you could do once you believe you've been ghosted. Again, we can't get rid of it, but we can do things that can diminish the chances of you becoming a ghosted individual. So a couple additional thoughts. Understand the organizational structure inside the company, whether you're applying for a job inside a firm that you're already employed at or with a company outside. And you can put together essentially an org chart, oftentimes if you have enough LinkedIn connections, and to see who's connected to who. Understand, and company politics come into decision-making when it comes to hiring. Understand what the political situation is. And sometimes going into Glassdoor, which is can be a very good, insightful site. Now, it tends to have a lot of negative comments in it. So you have to weigh that when you look at these reviews that people have made of companies that they worked for. And of course, individuals who felt that they were wrongfully dismissed are going to voice their disappointment, but they're going to tell you specifically what is the reason for that. And these might be very real reasons. Don't let age, be an obstacle. Turn it into your greatest asset, because experience is something that people can't take away from you. And I've worked with plenty of people who are in their 50s and 60s that are competing against other candidates who are literally 20 years younger than them. But there are things that a more advanced candidate can hang their hat on that somebody younger can't. And part of that is the stories you tell that enable you to hit the ground running more productively in a shorter period of time. Always be, creating advocates inside the company on your behalf, and always sell on your value. This is where your stories are so important, because we want proof. And the best proof is examples of things that you've done in previous employment situations that really impacted the company or the department in a very positive way. Couple quick things before I open up to questions, Elisa. If you're not yet a member of NSENG, I encourage you to go ahead and join the group. It's free, nsenginc.com. If we are not connected on LinkedIn, send me a connection request. Tell me you attended the session, and I'll give you access to my 30,000 LinkedIn connections. I always, am looking for feedback, so feel free to tell me, good, bad, or indifferent about what you took from this session. Join our LinkedIn group. Check out all the videos and podcast interviews that I've done. You'll find that under the About section. These are free, and I get interviewed by a lot of other individuals, and everything I do is job search related. Check out the library of webinar and workshop recordings. And our next meeting is actually going to be the first in-person meeting that we've had since COVID hit. It's going to be held on February 4th. I've already recorded the session, but it's going to be a live in-person event here in the Chicago area. So again, if you're looking for any coaching help, you can always send me an email at mgilbert@nsenginc.com.
Marty, thank you so much for a really engaging and informative presentation. It was excellent. For everybody who has participated here or who's watching, we'll be sending out Marty's contact information, so you can join his LinkedIn group and as such. I want to thank the Jewish Federation of Greater MetroWest and Project M for their generous support to fund this program. And lastly, just wanted to tell everybody that our next webinar for JBS job seekers is January 30th. It's going to be titled Elements of a Winning Interview, and we are welcoming back our guest speaker, Deb Craywick. So thank you, Marty.
Right. Oh, and one thing that maybe you're going to cover this, Lisa, is that I am coming back and doing a second session with all of you on marketing yourself to your next job. Right, 90% of the job search is marketing, and I'm going to break it down to a lot of different marketing activities. And it's probably about a month off from now, I believe. Maybe a little.
It is, and thank you, Marty. Yes, and so in a couple times we're going to have the pleasure of welcoming you back. Thank you.